Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Leonard. I'm Chairman of the Board of Appeals for the town of Milton. This is the 9/12/22 decision hearing on the application of 16 Amer, the application at 16 Amer Road. With us this evening is Judy Barrett, our consultant, and our board members, Giselle Joffer and Brian Connolly. So welcome, everyone.
Hi, John. How are you this evening?
I'm great, Judy. Thank you very much for the materials that you sent. As usual, they're excellent. You mentioned in your email about possibly trying to talk to Tim Zawinski before the meeting because he apparently is he's unavailable for this meeting. Did you have an opportunity to talk with him?
He and I did not connect today. We've, I think, both been in a zillion meetings. He does have this, however. And I don't have any comments back from a departmental perspective, but you know, you still have to see the rest of the decision. So I have some time to connect with Tim, and I'm going to try to do that tomorrow. We just were like ships passing in the night today.
Okay, and what we have here are the conditions to the decision. Is that what we have?
Yeah, and as I did with previous ones, John, I put some notes and footnotes around things that perhaps, you know, the neighbors had raised or that the developer had said or something, just to kind of make the board aware that there might be some additional content. I have gone through all the town department letters to make sure, or to try to make sure that I didn't miss anything important to them. And again, that's what I sort of want to check with Tim, who I think is a little closer to those letters than I have been. But I do have them. I did look through them. I went through Sean Reardon's last couple of peer review letters because I think I knew that he had some conditions to suggest. And those, as far as I know, are incorporated here.
Right.
So, you know, I don't want to minimize it, but where it's not a big project, some of the issues that we had with 648 Canton Ave or 582 Blue Hill are just, they're not the same. It's just a different scale. So not to minimize the importance of the decision, but just that I knew there were things that were in those decisions that simply didn't belong here.
Sure.
And tried to just not give you a piece of boilerplate. But, you know, some of these conditions really are, they're just kind of what goes in a comprehensive permit. It's who's got the permit, you know, how many units are being approved for, how many bedrooms in those units, you know, what the affordability is, what the parking is, all those basic things that have to be in here. You know, you're only granting the waivers insofar as you've granted them, and if you're not granting one, they're stuck. You know, these are all things you've seen before. I think what might make sense tonight is for you guys to take a look at the waivers in the back, because so much of what's said in the conditions is it making assumptions about those waivers being granted. So those are at the end of the decision. As you probably remember, we stick those at the end. Yeah. And it might be good to just make sure I didn't put approved in there because I wasn't sure that the board was going to grant them, but you might want to let me know, are those waivers requested by the applicant okay? Because if they are, then I can just finish out that section of the decision. I think the only thing that I was a little bit anxious about, you probably remember in these decisions, I have an exhibit that lists all the plans that are the approved plans for the permit. And I simply did not have time over the weekend to go through and make sure I had all those correct. That's the other thing I want to check with Tim. I think the record's pretty clear, but I have not filled out Exhibit A yet because I just wasn't sure I had the correct list in all cases.
Yeah, that's great, because I was going to suggest that Tim would be the go-to guy on
yeah,
to make sure we're referencing the latest
right.
Sure, we can discuss the waivers, but let me just ask you one more general question.
Sure.
You because I did read this over. I think it's excellent.
Thank you.
In addition to these materials, what further materials would you anticipate including in a final decision that we could vote on?
So the procedural history needs to be added. I actually almost left those headings in just to, you know, clarify what's not there. The procedural history needs to be written. The jurisdictional, you know, what's the governing law? What are the jurisdictional findings? What are the findings of fact? Those are the four pieces that go before section 5, which is the decision. And I just didn't try to write that right now because I wanted to get the conditions down. But
Okay.
that's why I'm saying there's still more opportunity here to make changes to this if you want, or if any of the town staff do. But for tonight, I was just trying to get the conditions down.
Okay, that sounds great. We, as I understand it, we have 40 days from the date of the last
When the hearing's
closing of the
closed.
hearing in order to do this.
Right.
Okay.
Do you want me to screen share, John? I mean, do you all have the copies in front of you? What do you want to do?
You know, sorry, Mr. Chair, sorry.
No, Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, that might be a good idea, Judy, if we're going to tackle the waivers,
Sure.
right, as I think the suggestion first.
Yeah.
I do have it in front of me, but maybe, also for anyone watching, and maybe you could guide us, Judy, and describe the waiver requested, and then we can just ask any questions and give any feedback on that.
Sure.
And just so I have it clear, this is the list of waivers that the applicant requested. Right.
Exactly.
And so you have included everything that they've requested, and
I
right.
did.
Yep. Okay. Great. Okay. So I Mr. Chair, I defer to you, but that might be one way to go through these.
Sure.
No, I think that's an excellent way of doing it. Giselle, what do you think?
Sure. I do have it up in front of me, so happy to do it either way, but
Yeah. Why don't I go ahead and screen share it? And then, at least as Brian said, if someone is trying to watch and see, they'll see what you guys are looking at. That's probably not a bad idea.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let me ask you a question, Judy. On the waivers, which I read over with some degree of difficulty, because I'm not a builder or contractor, and the various sections of the bylaw and the town's ordinances are not readily at hand. Have we received, and I assume, as you said, these are the waivers suggested by the applicant, by Mr. Schomer and his team, as to what waivers they need in order to construct the project as proposed. And I guess my question is twofold. Number one, of my board members, let's start out with, do we have an agreement that 16 units that should be constructed here? But then secondly, if that's the truth, then do we have these waivers been reviewed by Sean Reardon in particular?
Yeah, Sean went through all the waivers because he did that as part of his original site civil review. And by the time you got to August 30th, I think was his last letter, as far as he was concerned, all the comments had been addressed, and I don't have any conditions suggested from him around the waivers. There are some condition language in here in the condition section that came from John, but not on the waivers.
Okay, so to the best of our knowledge, Mr. Reardon does not have any difficulty or objections to granting the waivers requested.
That's my understanding.
As they are requested in order to build the project as proposed.
Right.
So I guess let me just ask a broader question, because I think we've done this once or twice on other hearings, but since I don't think we have an engineer amongst us, which probably is a very good thing, my question is, do we run any risk or enter dangerous territories by deviating from the waivers? Let me talk broadly, just broadly speaking.
Well, they're asserting that they need these waivers to build the project that's in the plans before you.
Okay.
I haven't heard anybody on the peer review side or the town staff side say they don't need these waivers. I haven't heard anybody say that. And I think if that were the case, I would have heard it by now.
Yep.
So I don't think there's a question as to whether the waivers are I think they've laid out what they think they need to build the project. I haven't heard anybody say, well, they actually don't need X or Y. I haven't heard that. You know, some of these are probably a little more general than I would like them, but they have the basic ones they have laid out pretty specifically. The dimensional requirements that they're seeking waivers from. You know, the use regulations that they're seeking waivers from. I mean, those kinds of things. And the curb cut, like the early ones in the list, curb cuts, removal of trees and so forth, that's been in all the others. So those seem to be pretty standard. Again, you know, nobody has these necessarily, who's watching this at home can see these, but a lot of these are just what they have already been. It's when you get to actually on page 23 in your copy, when you get to dimensional regulations, that's where you're going to see substantially different content from the previous decisions because the project is small, the lot is small, the dimensional waivers are different, but it's the same waivers that they need. The one they don't need is height.
Right. Okay, so the most sensible way you're recommending is we just run through these waivers section by section and see if we have any issues or concerns.
Well, I think that is the way to proceed. And frankly, you know, the other way to think about this too is that the approval of the waivers is kind of always, but subject to conditions that are in the decision, you know, that may somehow limit that waiver. So we've kind of said that in a pretty standard way on all the other decisions. You know, yeah, we'll give you this waiver subject to, you know, any limitations in the conditions of approval. So I think you're kind of covered by the decision. Sorry, Brian, to cut you off.
I'm sorry, I cut you off, Judy. I mean, I think the way that I look at this, and tell me if this is the right perspective to take. So on the one hand, we are relieving the applicant from all of the restrictions and requirements of these provisions of the zoning code and different bylaws of the town. On the other hand, we're imposing an entire new set of restrictions and requirements by binding them to the plans and specifications that they've presented to us.
That's right.
And so while on the one hand, we may be relieving from certain obligations, on the other hand, we're imposing new stringent requirements on exactly what can be built.
Yep.
You know, so we, unlike a zoning code which has to anticipate, which may or may never come, we have a specific project to evaluate. The other thing we give up is the further review that comes out from some of the permitting processes that would follow, let's say, a zoning process, whether it be from the police department or the public works department. But again, I think what we do here, as Judy says, we're creating conditions that require, for example, final plans to come back, and we'll walk through these in due course, but things that require the building inspector or the DPW director or the planning director to approve. So I view this as us making judgment calls on how we are regulating these policy interests rather than necessarily eliminating or relieving the applicant from complying with reasonable regulations.
Is that well put, Judy?
I was just going to say, this is why you were such a big help to me on the ice house. The way your mind works on this is like really good. Thank you.
And I guess in a sense, if we grant a waiver that's really not needed, it becomes irrelevant. Is that true?
I mean, as long as the waivers don't give them carte blanche, I think that's really the issue. And I think they've done a pretty good job saying, here are your existing dimensional rules. This is what we're proposing to build. And frankly, I have to fight with a lot of developers to get that stuff. Sometimes they just want to blanket or just to say as shown on the plans. And I will give the applicant due. There is a lot more detail here as to exactly what they're asking you to waive, as opposed to just waive an entire section of the bylaw.
Right. So for example, we're being asked to waive the parking regulations. Parking regulations, and it's just in the waiver before us, it's just quite simply says regulations applicable to off-street parking. But there's a lot involved in that, right? There are number of spaces, there's width of spaces, turning radius, et cetera. And so, you know, I don't think any of us could enumerate every requirement off the top of our head, but what we do know is we've got specific plans, parking plans, drawn, shown, counted, that I think reflect the understanding of the board, you know, having taken in public comments, and that will have accountability following any approval of a permit.
I think that's exactly right. Yeah. Judy, you concur?
I do.
Giselle, do you have any questions about these waivers? And we'll start the rather tedious process of going through them.
I don't about the waivers, but I do have a bigger picture issue that it may be helpful to deliberate on before we get to the waivers. And John, you touched on it when you mentioned, like, do we have agreement on the 16 units? And something that stuck out to me, well, first of all, it's nice to have this opportunity to actually discuss and deliberate with you at this point now that the public hearing is closed. So in some ways, I feel like this comment comes late in the game, but in some ways it's it's the appropriate time to discuss it, right?
Mhm.
So what I was struck by, and this may have been evident from my questions, was the email from the fire chief saying, can I get some more room? I can get in there, with everything being perfect, but everything's never perfect, right? And that's just the case when there's an accident or an emergency. Nothing's ever perfect. No one ever uses that word to describe even the response.
Yeah.
And so I think safety should be one of our number one concerns here. It's safety for the residents of the new development, safety of the neighbors, safety for the first responders. And that in part could be solved by just saying, okay, we think we need X amount more space, or getting more detail on that from the fire chief, or having him approve something down the road. But what I heard from our experts was, at this point, every inch sort of counts, right? If you do give him extra space on that turning, you're taking some space from the public space sets for children's play, or right, every space is sort of accounted for.
Yeah.
What also struck me was Sean Reardon's view that while his objections had been addressed, there was a little space for snow accumulation, for example. So there would need to be a plan to take that snow
Right.
off site. There was little to no space for construction parking during the process. So there'd need to be a detailed plan for that. So a lot of signals to me that this is an overly dense project, but really what mattered most, I will say for me, and what my sort of prime concern is, the way all of that could potentially impact on safety. And so I think I'd like it to be up for discussion. I'm, not an architect or a designer, but it seems to me that even just a little more space would be beneficial from a safety perspective.
Do you want to be heard, Brian, or should I pick that up?
Yeah, I'd love to hear your perspective, Mr. Chair.
Okay, my perspective is I thought several things. I thought Sean Reardon indicated that, as Giselle said, this is a tight site and the turning ratio was tight, but it would work. It's not perfect. The project isn't perfect. Life isn't perfect. And I think in response to that, Mr. Schomer indicated that he and his experts were going to try to work on that, particularly I think it's a turning ratio into the site that was of concern.
Yes.
And they thought they could squeeze a few more inches in there, which I think, according to the fire chief, would make a big difference. And then the question became, if the project as presently designed gets to the finish line but would like a little more room there, and they're willing to try to give us a little more room, does it make sense to spend thousands of dollars or spend a lot of additional time redesigning that plan over 1 or 2 inches, where both of our experts, Mr. Bomer and Mr. Reardon, believe that it is adequate, but they'd like it to be a little more than adequate. And so my thought was that to delay the project, to require redesigning of plans over 1 inch or 2, that even our own experts said were was adequate, but they would like to have a little more margin of error, as Giselle is suggesting she'd like to see. I thought that Mr. Schomer was indicating to us that we would see that, but was not looking to redesign all of the plans for that one purpose. And considering, to be frank, the size of the project, which is 16 units, the complications of all this decision and getting something that that gets us to home base. The decision is, I don't know how anyone builds these things or gets them designed with all of the technical requirements and procedural requirements and time and effort for 16 units. I can understand that if you're building 80 units or 100 units. So this is a very, very small project in a sense. And I think public safety is of concern. I think Giselle's exactly right. I think that I feel comfortable knowing that we have expressed our concern for another inch or two on that driveway. And I think they said they'd provide it. They said they'd work on it. And I just, I think to delay this project over something that our own experts say is technically correct or feasible, they're just like a little more wiggle room. I don't think I would go there under these circumstances. I personally think that this project has been substantially and amazingly modified, principally due to the, I think, skillful but persistent suggestions of our peer reviewers. I think that's it. And I also think that the applicant here and his peer reviewers, I won't go on to name them, but I think they've all totally cooperated with our team, and they've been very forthright. And this project, if you looked at it now as compared to what it looked like from day one, is a transformational changes were made. It's a much better project. And so my feeling is seeing that type of cooperation from the applicant, I would be willing under these circumstances to take the applicant at its word that they will do everything in their power to give us more room on particularly the driveway, the entranceway, so that it is not only technically sufficient, but it's more than technically sufficient. So that's my thought, and I think it. I don't think, considering the time, effort, and expense that everyone's gone through here, that I would tie up the project to require a definitive plan showing that type of additional inch or two. Nobody will see the difference. I think it may be asking, putting too much on an overly, I won't say overly, but on a very cooperative applicant. That's my view. I think at some point this project has got to get forward, could move forward, and I think that I wouldn't shortstop the project over an inch on the driveway where our experts say it's adequate. You want to be heard, Brian?
Yeah, sure. And I take all that, John. I think Giselle's comment was broader than just the access point and more, I think, all the repercussions of the significant density that the developer, came forward with. I mean, my view is it's the project is more dense than it should be. And every pressure point we had on this project all related to the fact that the site is being completely maxed out, right? We've talked a lot about inches because the decision was made to go with the biggest footprint possible. So we did make it much better, and the developer did have a good attitude about, revisions to respond to comments, except, intransigence about the number of units, right? And I think almost every problem in common we had could have been resolved, and that I would say the project could have been improved by removing some units to create more space. But we've went through a lengthy process, and we have, not only the applicants' professionals, who are absolutely qualified making their case, but we had our own professionals, our own experts weighing in, our own civil engineer, our own traffic engineer, our own design professionals telling us that in their professional opinion, it is safe. And in their professional opinion, the drainage works. And in their professional opinion, it complies with and is appropriate for traffic. And, in their professional opinion, it's an appropriate design and that the density works. And, in the context of a, application for a comprehensive permit under Chapter 40B, as opposed to, I think, a more discretionary permit, I think we're held to a different standard. And I think to John's point, I don't think the record before us is really affording us a strong case to eliminate units based on the advice we've gotten from our own experts on the project and its impacts. And I don't think, by what I said, it's a bad project. I just think it was a missed opportunity to be a much better and even a good or even great project if it had been a bit smaller and created a little bit more space on the site. So I think that the conclusion I'm reaching, Mr. Chair, is that I would support 16 units on the site. I think our choice is, I think that's the choice presented to us. And I think because of the record before us, it's difficult for the board to decide otherwise.
Let me add one additional thing, and I'll throw the ball back to Giselle. One of the difficulties here, and we saw it just a little bit on the East Milton application, is that, and it was not raised, it wasn't tried out, but it's the question of the feasibility of the project. When we were dealing with East Milton, the attorney for the applicant, when we were seeking to have a lower number of units, and that was at least 100 unit or 110 unit project, was suggesting by reducing it by X number of units, the project would not be financially feasible. And we didn't get into that here. And I think in large part, as Brian suggested, because our peer reviewers said that, sure, it would be nice to have 10 units there. They didn't use 10, but it would be nice to have a less dense project, but that the 16 units worked under all the circumstances. And so whether 14 units or 12 units would make this project financially not feasible, I don't have the slightest idea, but I think that and what amazed me about this particular application is that there were many, many hearings here. There's a lot of technical evidence here. And it's only for 16 units. And I know it's a small space. It's not a big space. And I wonder, as a layman, why and if this project is financially feasible, to go through the type of expense, reviews, permitting, review of the permitting that this project is going to have to go through for only 16 units, to me is is somewhat amazing. I don't know how it would be financially feasible, but I don't know. So I guess that's the other issue here. And when we raised that issue in the East Milton case, I think it was Judy, but it may have been somebody else who suggested that they had an expert on financial feasibility. And if that were to be tried out, argued, evidence presented, it would be another 4 months or something like that. I think the expert that we were considering hiring, if that was going to be a tried issue, was going to take about 4 months or more to gather the type of materials necessary to determine the financial feasibility. Now, I'd assume here it would be shorter, but it's a very complicated task. And then we'd have to, they'd have their experts address the financial feasibility, and the end result here, in my view, we're going to delay this project for 6 months or more on a project that our own experts say is a feasible and adequate project, though it is tight and it is a large number of units. I would suspect that Mr. Rashoma would argue vociferously that the cost of this project, if you started to eliminate units, you may make it not feasible, and we'll be going here for another 6 months. And I think that under these circumstances, I don't think, number one, it's fair to the applicant, and I don't think that it's fair to the town to prolong this application for another 6 months and to cost everybody a fortune over an issue which is going to have a lot of confusing numbers and theories and suppositions. And I think that I think we may be subject to some criticism. I'm not worried necessarily about criticism, but raising an issue such as the number of units and the financial feasibility of the project after the hearing is closed.
So the only thing I want to just point out is that Sean did not say, this is fine. He said,
That's right.
it's tight. He said it's tight, and that we should include a condition requiring the applicant to obtain approval from the fire department for the access prior to the start of construction.
I think that's true.
And I mean, I think I have that in there, but I will check. I mean, that to me is sort of course, the problem is it puts a lot of burden on the fire chief, who, you know, the difficult spot you guys are in is that no one said 12 units would be okay, or 14 units would be okay, or 10. They just said, it's tight. It's like, this is really unnerving. This is going to be hard. And so the ball gets thrown in your courts to try to sort out, well, then what would work? And that's, you know, I would say, God forbid you have to do more of these in the future. But I think when you have a situation like this, don't ever be afraid to push back and say, so tell me what it should be, because it would be helpful to you guys to have that on the record. And Giselle, it's just, I'm looking at all the correspondence. I've got a million PDFs open on my computer while we're talking, and no one ever says 16 is too much. They just, everybody says the access is really tight. It would be good to have more space, but no one says how much. So Sean's kind of bailout on this was include a condition requiring the project to obtain approval for the proposed access from the fire department prior to start of construction. So if I don't have that explicitly in there, I think I do, but if I don't, we could just put that in there. And again, the only problem with that is it puts the fire chief now in the position of having to be the, you know, the bad guy, if you will. If you, I guess that's probably not a fair way to put it, but you know, the one who's got to make that decision.
Well, it's my memory, Judy, that the fire chief submitted a letter on
He
the
sent
last
an
day.
email, a memo. We have a memo, and he said, you know, it's really tight. A little more space would be a big help. but he doesn't say how much. And then he goes on to say, thank God they're going to sprinkler it, because that certainly matters. And I think on other projects in other communities where there's been a real concern about the density and the access for fire protection purposes, when the applicant says, I'll put sprinklers in, most fire chiefs will kind of breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief and say, well, that does to some extent kind of partially mitigate the concern. So he's acknowledging the sprinklers, but he's still saying this access is really tight. But that's all we have to go on, is everybody's agreeing it's tight.
And just a point of clarification, the fire chief doesn't say inches. Tim Zerwinski, I believe, said that in a conversation with the fire chief, that was the impression that he got, which I'm sure is Tim's accurate reflection. But as a lawyer, I'm dealing with sort of what's on the paper officially in the record. And what he says is, I can make it if it's perfect, and it's not perfect. And I mean, Brian, you're exactly right. That's my concern, and that's what sort of focused a lot of the density issues for me, because when we tried to discuss it, it became, well, we already don't have enough space, right? And so if we're designing, or we're not designing, but the developer is designing a project in our town that will be there, for decades, it seems to me that our duty to the town is to make sure that it's the best possible with respect to safety and other issues with respect to density, even if that does take 6 more months. And I'm in complete agreement that if this discussion had happened during the open hearing, we could have gotten additional expert feedback. I also think there's still a process in place. If we were to say, for example, take out one townhouse, which would be 2 units. If the developer believes that's economically infeasible and they prove that, then we still have the opportunity to prove that despite that, this is something that's not safe for our town. And then that comes, I agree, Brian, sort of full circle to what you're saying, which is maybe we don't have the record to support that at that point. And I'm aware of that, but just in terms of my own view and looking at it. And also, I also think we have to take the neighbors' testimony into account. Like, they're not, I guess, professional experts to my knowledge. I don't know what they do as professions, but they are the people on the ground. And we heard repeatedly, it's too much, right? It's not going to be safe. I think most often they mentioned the parking. And they're already being off-street parking just with one family being there, and they believe that it will be difficult and cause issues. And that, I think, was the trigger issue for them with respect to density. But we heard that over and over again. So.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Giselle.
No, go ahead. I'm done.
Yeah, I mean, you get the question exactly right. Like, what is the way we can do right by the town here, right? How do we make this the best project that the zoning board, can make it? And I think we've got sort of 2 paths to head down in terms of how we make this the best project it can be. One is to go down a path of identifying all of the conditions that we impose to make this 16-unit project the best project that it can be from the town's perspective. And another approach would be to either reject the application or to, meaningfully reduce the number of units in a way that would, be worth having a significant change in density. And the challenge we face is an appeal to the Housing Appeals Committee out of this case, which we, I think, have to assume is a possibility if we're certainly if we're to reject it, and also if we're to significantly reduce units, will come not only with, we'll have to see the merits of success. Again, we just said with the record before us from our own consultants, I think it's harder for us to make that case. But the consequence of that appeal is not just potentially losing, the request to reduce the number of units, but also all of the conditions we want to put on the project now are all also going to be in jeopardy of being appealed. And so I think the judgment call is, do we invest ourselves in trying to condition and limit this project and have the further reviews from the planning director and the building inspector to make the 16-unit project the best possible project it could be? Or do we head down a path that leads toward an appeal, which then puts everything on the table to be challenged? And, I think we didn't have, I suppose, a chance to have the internal debate, but we did ask, really push the applicant in our own consulting team on all these questions. And I think because I for one was, uncomfortable at times with some of the challenges on the site. But what came back to us, again, was our team saying, it had solved their comments. And so I think my concern is heading down the appeal route leads us ultimately to a weaker decision that in a missed opportunity to impose conditions that improve the project. It's a judgment call. I completely take your points, and it's just, I think, a matter of which tool, which path, puts us in the best position to deliver the best project.
That's helpful, Brian. And procedurally, I don't think I was clear, and that's how it works. If there's appeal based on the economic infeasibility of the number of units, let's say, or one particular condition, all conditions can then be raised?
They will raise them all. It's basically de novo.
Well, I was going to say that our record before the Housing Appeals Committee has never been very good. We've talked with Johanna Schneider about several cases that she's presently handling, and Johanna's a smart, terrific, tough trial lawyer, and she was apprehensive about the reception that she received there, I guess is a nicer way to put it. And I think the other problem is that what we're doing is we're talking about possibly trying to reduce the number of units to make the project less dense. And if you did left the frontage units, which are the larger units, in place, and you made a reduction in units in the back, I don't know how that relates to the access issue. It may give you a little more room for parking of Amazon trucks, or it may give you a better playground area, or it may give you a more pleasant area of amenities on the project. But I think the issue that the fire chief is dealing with is the issue that, yes, he'd like the access a little bit wider if it could be. And I think going to unit reductions is not reasonably related to getting another inch or two. And maybe the fire chief didn't say an inch or two, but he did approve of the access as is. And it seems to me that it would be kind of engineering the project in a decision where the applicant may not anticipate or may not have anticipated when they were presenting the evidence as to where this board would go. Because our experts have agreed that 16 units is feasible, and it is tight, but it's feasible. So,
but I just want to be clear. Sean did not say it's okay. Sean said, put a condition in the decision that allows the fire chief to approve that access before construction.
He didn't say it was unsafe. The fire chief did not say it was unsafe. If he thought it was unsafe, he should have said it's unsafe. I didn't talk to him, and I think he, I don't know what he was thinking. He wrote the letter.
His last email said, I refer to the auto turn diagram submitted. In Exhibit 1 from the July 2022 diagram, the ladder is shown to be able to make the turn into the site from the Blue Hill Ave direction of Amer Road. This is a very tight turn, and any extra space given would be extremely helpful. The auto diagrams are best case scenarios, but we know this is not always the case.
What do you
Do with that?
Well, that's what we have.
I mean, I think, if we follow back and forth the extensive correspondence between, Sean Reardon from Tetra Tech and the applicant advising the board, his 57-point email, not including subpoints, like his conclusion is that the applicant and the design team have addressed all of our comments and no outstanding technical issues remain, period. Right? That's I think the conclusory statement of civil and traffic engineering for the project. Not qualified, right? Not any sort of reluctance expressed, right? Just, we can scroll through the style, right? It's bold, larger font, comment resolved, comment resolved, comment resolved, right? So I think the record before us is after, very professional review and professional response from the applicant. Our advisors, and I think, I don't know if we got a final written response from Cliff Bomer, but certainly his last verbal one was that, because I had asked, he was satisfied. So we take your point that, and by all means, let's, and I think you've done this, and let's, spend time thinking about it, but let's make sure all of Sean's comments, right? I mean, his comments were resolved because the applicant made commitments to mitigate and to modify, right? So we'll make sure that all of Sean's great work is reflected in the permit. But I think so long as every way that those 57 issues were resolved is reflected in our permit.
So you got to compare the two letters, because what he's saying on the 30th is comment resolved on layout and materials plan, comment 11. But when you go back to his August 3rd letter, he's saying, include that condition. So
by all means, right. I think the larger topic we're discussing right now as a board is the first question John moved is this a 16-unit project? Okay. Right. Then we're going to move on to, if it is a 16-unit project, how do we condition it, right? How do we improve it? How do we make it the best possible 16-unit project? Mm-hmm. And I think that's what Sean's exercise did. But I don't think, and he has quite a number of requirements, things we have to impose to make this a safe and responsible and quality 16-unit project. But I don't think any of his comments are that it should not be 16 units or that it will not succeed at 16 units, right? I think that's where the record brings us. And that's why where I come out is I think my view is that we should issue a comprehensive permit for a 16-unit project, but with a very thorough set of conditions that's consistent with the public record and the advice that we got during the public hearing process.
Well, I fully agree with what you're saying, Brian. My question and my concern is how that gets worked into the question of access to the property and the question of the safety of the access, and whether it's possible, I guess, for us. I don't know the width of the access. I don't have those plans in front of me, but let's assume it's 20 feet and it's a close call to get fire equipment in there. But if it was 20 feet, 3 inches, it's a much easier turn. I mean, do we request or compel the access to be increased by 2 inches or 3 inches?
I mean, I guess, look, I think one, yeah, John, I agree. Look, I don't think it's for us within our role or our qualification to say what the right width of dimension is. I do think it would be fair for us to say that a condition prior to the building permit being issued is that the applicant obtain the approval of the fire chief to the final access and driveway layout, right? If if the applicant gets the approval of the fire chief, then I think I would feel that I had done a responsible overview from a fire safety point of view. And if the fire chief requires changes in order to obtain approval, then the applicant will have a decision to make, right? Whether that's something that would be appealed, or something that would be something they could work with. But I would be comfortable deferring, to a final sign off from the fire chief on this issue.
So if the applicant thought that, well, maybe one way to solve if it is an access issue for fire equipment, I'll take 8 inches off of each side of the project and squeeze aisles and squeeze entranceways and all of that. That's a design issue for the developer. Is that right?
I think the way our permit would work, right, is that in the proposed conditions that Judy circulated to us, we are delegating to the building inspector to exercise his or her judgment over the course of this permit on behalf of the board and sort of implementing the final plans. And so what would be a great outcome is if the advanced plans proposed by the applicant are satisfactory to the fire chief, then I think everyone's pleased. And if there are changes that are required for the fire chief, that they would also need to get approved by the building inspector, the way our permit would read. And so if there's modifications made that are satisfactory to the fire chief and to the building inspector and to the applicants, again, I think I'd be satisfied that the board did its job on the point. And the applicant would have to achieve those changes in order to get a building permit and build a project. So I believe they'd be motivated to be cooperative to obtain those changes, if necessary, if there are any.
Or appeal if they thought that.
Or appeal, yeah. And I suppose, if I suppose that's right, and I suppose that's an appeal risk I'd be willing to take if that's the sole issue that's outstanding, and we're at a point where the applicant can't convince the Milton Fire Chief that it's a safe project, and so be it, right? I suspect they're a capable developer and a reasonable fire chief, and they'll find a solution, is my guess, assuming we've worked out everything else here. But that would seem a good balancing of the concerns.
Yeah, it's my guess as well, because it's really not a guess. It's probably a determination of whether it's probable or not, because I think the fire chief has exhibited flexibility in his analysis of the access to the site and all of that. I presume that that would continue under the circumstances. And his engineers, the engineers for the applicant, have demonstrated some flexibility, and maybe that's the prudent way of handling it, rather than trying to redesign the access ourselves or get involved in that technical issue ourselves.
Right.
Giselle, what do you?
I think that's a reasonable proposal for the safety issue. Just sort of looking at our broader discussion, I want to make a correction, because in my notes I had that the fire chief said perfect, but I guess he said best case. So I just wanted to make that correction for the record. I had misremembered that, and I think it could be different. I want to be clear, though, that it's a safety issue for me, but it's also that particular email that crystallized for me, I think, just smaller comments here and there that when I take in the totality, in my mind suggests that they would justify just decreasing the number of units. So I think from my perspective, I just want to go back and take a closer look at the record and see if I think there is a case there. And I also thank you, Brian, for your really point of clarification on the procedure going forward, because I think that is important, right? To weigh what we think is most important and what we can keep versus what we might risk on an appeal. And I frankly, I just wasn't clear and aware that it would be likely, right, that all conditions would be appealed if that were the case. So I think it's been a helpful discussion, but I guess I can remain undecided.
Well, I guess the big question is, when do we start deciding this? Maybe when we go through the conditions and go through the waivers and all of that, it may be an easier decision.
I think so, John. And like I said, I think I just need to go back and do a little more homework in terms of what the record states currently.
Okay, so shall we see if we can make some progress and do the waivers and see whether we have agreements on the waivers?
I think that sounds good.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So do you need me to screen share these, or do you want to just go by what you have in your hands?
No, I thought you were right, Judy, by screen sharing them. Any member of the public who's listening in will have some idea as to what's going on. Do you agree, Brian?
Yeah, I do. I think it helps anyone observing to follow our conversation in case they don't have the draft in front of them.
So I apparently don't have screen share permission tonight. Is Crystal on? And does she have authority to give me that?
I'm here. I thought everybody was able to, because I usually check. Hold on a second.
I just tried it and it did. I don't have, yeah. Host disabled participant screen sharing.
Huh. All right. Hold on, because on my end it's not saying that. Let me see.
Yeah, I'm not listed as a co-host, which I would be if I had screen share permission.
All right. Try again, please.
Sure. Look at
This is
that.
MATV here. I just made a change. For whatever reason, yep, there we go.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep, sorry about that.
It's fine.
Super, thank you very much. Very helpful.
Board members, can you all see this?
Yes.
Yes.
So
thank you.
this is really out of the applicant's submission to the board. I just converted it to a Word document and added it here at the end, and I think I got everything right. So this is all of this has been in other permits, all the beginning of this, the requirement for the curb cut permit from the select board, because the applicant, doesn't have to go to another board for approval. So it would be the DPW director, as they're saying. So I mean, that I just kept this in here. Approval is to town ways, notice and approval of DPW director. That's been in every single one of these conditions, or permits rather. So I just left that the way it has been before. Removal of trees. So this is about the trees and stone walls requirements in your bylaws. A waiver sought from that so that they don't have to go and get approval from anybody else. They're saying that they want to remove brush and so forth to construct the project, including proposed access driveways and so forth, as shown on the plans. Something comparable to that has been in the other permits as well.
So on this point, so I support the waiver. The point is, we've actually spent a lot of time thinking about the landscaping plans and the what trees will stay, what won't, and what's critical for our work here is to make sure that our conditions, tie the applicant to the commitments made in the public hearing process. And so that's how we ensure, we've got a good policy in terms of preservation of existing tree and planting of future trees and other plantings.
So I think the planning board had specific comments on this too, if I'm not mistaken. And I can go back and check. I actually think I have that somewhere in the decision. About the tree.
Trees, and it's in there.
Yeah, okay. For red line purposes, all of you, I'm just making notes to remind myself what we've done so I can clean this up later. Authorizing the uses, that's been in all the other decisions as well. They're proposing a residential use types that aren't allowed in that district. So they need that waiver. They're looking for a sign waiver. The special permit for earth removal, they're seeking to have that waived. To be
Can
able
I
to-
just pause on the signage for a minute?
Of course,
It's really-
absolutely.
I don't remember us really discussing signage much, and at least I can't recall seeing any plans showing signage. I do see that the list of plans has a signage plan. Was there one submitted and we just didn't present it at a,
I
on the
don't-
screen in a meeting?
I don't think I've seen it. If it's there, I haven't seen it.
I didn't see a signage.
So it is in the list of submittal requirements. Let's see, to building mounted. Waiver sought in its entirety to permit all project signage, which will be limited to building mounted signage to identify buildings and locations, site directional advisory signs, traffic signage, and illuminated monument sign at the site entrance. So that's what they're asking to be able to do, but they haven't given you, any plan. I don't recall seeing plans for the signs or any dimensions around them. So if you want to waive this in part, we could perhaps put more detail in the conditions.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think why they need this waived at all, right? So we're not a commercial project. We're a residential project. We have an ordinance of bylaws that set forth how signage should work. And I'm just wondering why they can't comply with whatever the town's signage requirements are, or seek whatever relief they need for signs. What I'm uncomfortable with is just giving a unrestricted right to have no regulation, right? So I don't know whether, I suppose our options would be to say any signage is subject to the planning director or the building inspector's approval, I suppose would be another, but, or we could just say, we've got rules and signs and you should comply with them.
Yeah. I mean,
Well,
I don't know why, oh, I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
Don't we have a sign committee or a sign panel that reviews? I thought we had some type of a bylaw or a set of conditions regarding signs, and that if you wanted to put up a sign, you had to get a permit from the sign committee or something like that.
Well, I think that's part of the issue is that, once they've got a comp permit, they don't have to go back to any board for approval. It's simply getting a permit
Right.
from building inspector, which will be shown in the final plans.
Right. So the question is, so we're not saying they do have to go back to a board again. We're just saying they have to comply with whatever the zoning code, the zoning bylaw says about signage, right?
I don't think it says very much, Brian. I think that's the issue.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. I'm sure it has some limits. I guess I don't know offhand what they are.
I don't know the sign by law well enough to comment. I'm going to look it up right now while we're talking. But I mean, you could, well, first of all, I can't answer this tonight. I can go back through the plans
Yeah,
tomorrow.
I'll do the, why don't we just pause, just keep this one open. I'll also gonna read the signage section of the bylaw just to freshen up on it. But I'm trying to think why they need any particularly meaningful signage at all. But if they were gonna have, a name for the property, which residential properties often have a name, and they had uplit, lighting on the sign, that might not be fair to the neighbors. There should be some check on what kind of signage they would do, and it may be that they don't have any meaningful signage plan at all. They just this might be a bit of a laundry list of waivers, but I suppose that's one that I would think that for the type of project they shouldn't need a lot of additional flexibility.
Judy,
Right.
could it be a condition prior to getting the building permit that we had to see the signage plan to the extent we haven't?
So the problem is that you can't have them come back to you for approval of anything. That's why, they don't want to have to go back to any boards, and really they shouldn't.
Right. We can defer though to the building inspector or to the planning director though, Judy, right?
Absolutely, you certainly could do.
So I think our choices here are to waive altogether, which I wouldn't support. Or I would if we had a right condition, right? We could waive the requirement, but then have a condition that says signage should be approved by the planning director or signage should be approved by the building inspector. That would be one reasonable approach, is to have conditions on it. Another would be just to say, just comply with the signage bylaw.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we're obviously going to be deliberating again after tonight, so I'm happy to keep this one open, and I'll
And I can
take
do
a
some
look
more
at the
homework.
bylaw and see if there's anything that I think is particularly important there to
Right,
hold on to.
that's fine.
Yeah, look, I agree to defer it. The only issue is, I think the more you get involved in the location of signs and the directions of signs and what the language is on the signs, you can be talking for hours on end about signs.
Mhm.
And
Just
I'm not
always
sure that
never fun.
I
Never
kind of
fun.
I like the possibility of deferring that issue to the building commissioner. But let's take a look and see what I think the sign bylaw is very, very general. I think that's why we have a sign committee, and people go before the sign committee and they go before them again and again. And it all depends on the size, the color, the lighting, I think you could spend as much time on the signage as you do on the safety issues. So,
Yeah,
I'm not sure it's not better to take a look at what the law is, see who we do have to get involved in signage. And I hate to say it, but I'd hate to be building commissioner for this or any of these projects, because a lot of discretionary judgments are made by the building commissioner. And or a building agent. Apparently, I don't know what it's called. It's somewhere in here. Like a master of some decision making. He points us like a special master. We don't want to get involved in President Trump and his problems with special masters, but yeah, I think that's what he calls for in here somewhere, so as to allow the building commissioner to be a building commissioner, not spend all day trying to plan this project. No, I don't know. Do you remember, Brian or Giselle, somewhere in this process, there's some discussion of retaining experts who kind of manage the project and review the project in lieu, or let's say under the tutelage of the building commissioner?
well, there is a general provision for that, but it's technical review. So
Okay.
why don't we park this and let me do a little more. I can go back through the plans tomorrow and see if maybe there was already something submitted that we're just not remembering because it's been going on for so long. You want me to do that? I mean, I'm happy to. I can talk to Tim as well.
Okay, that's great.
I mean, Tim's going to know the bylaw better than I do. So let me just check with him in the morning.
Okay, so is it agreed we defer this one until the next hearing?
Yes.
Yes.
Judy will get back to us.
Right.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Were you going to say something, Giselle, that I could just cut somebody off?
No, I was just agreeing to the deferral.
I thought I heard another voice in there somewhere. The special permit for earth removal. Basically what they're saying is that they're going to construct the project in accordance with the plans that they've submitted.
I agree with that.
Any issues with that? If not, I'm
And
just
for
gonna
me,
start marking ones that are approved that there's no issue on. Let's see. So now we get to the dimensional regulations. So once again, Giselle, the question of number of units sort of does kind of come up again. I mean, this is really looking more at setbacks and so forth, but depending on how many units you put in the development, some of this may or may not apply. So, but to work within the limits of work shown on the plan, these are the waivers they are saying they would need.
Yeah, I guess it's just again, so I support the waivers, right? They're just was necessary for the project we're approving to move forward. But just to reflect on our concerns on density, building coverage, our code would require 15% maximum. They're almost double.
Yeah.
They had 27.6%.
Yeah.
Right. Gross floor area, 30%, and they're at 53%. So in any event, it's just an incredibly dense project.
Yeah.
But I mean, look, the waiver is right. Right? If we're approving the project, we waive these regulations and we impose the requirements of the plans and our conditions.
Right.
Agreed.
And this waiver doesn't grant them the 16 units. It's the next one that does. So, you know,
Right, but this is related to the 16 units.
oh,
It's-
absolutely. I'm being a little bit silly, but
Yeah, but if you start tightening up on the dimensional requirements, then the unit count goes down.
right.
Okay. So do you want to reserve this until you talk about the next one? The directly
Yeah, fair enough,
related.
right? I think we should defer on this. Candidly, you know what, we should defer in the dimensional regulations, and we should defer in the number of dwelling lots until we've finished our discussion, you know, on the density, and Michelle's, you know, giving us thoughtful reasons why she's going to give us some more thought before, you know, we next meet. And then I think those will follow along with our larger vote on the project.
I agree. By definition, they will.
Yeah.
So do you not want to go over the rest of the waivers then? Are you thinking, is that really the
No,
whole?
let's move forward with the rest. Let's assume that even in a modified project, there would be designs that would accommodate them. Those two in particular are so correlated to the size of the project that I just think it's just more consistent for us to hold them open until we finish our deliberation on that point.
Okay. So no accessory building is within 40 feet of the front lot line. So they're asking to have that waived to the extent necessary to authorize buildings shown on the plans with setbacks of 4 feet from the lot line adjacent to Amer Road, etc.
That seems fine.
You think this one's all right?
I mean, I think
It's
we were,
consistent with the plans.
we're well aware of the
Right.
building being a lot closer.
So do you want to say this one's approved? I'm just trying to read where you guys
Yes.
are. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
No building other than one-story accessory structure is permitted within 15 feet of the side lot line or within 30 feet of a building on an adjacent lot, etc. So naturally, they're asking to waive this because of the proximity of the buildings to each other, given the density of the project.
Seems
We
consistent.
approve that.
I
Approved?
agree.
Yes.
Oops, jeez, I can't even write tonight. Sorry, folks.
You must have another hearing after this one, Judy.
No, I've just been on Zoom all day. My brain is just dead. So, let's see. So now we're down to the last few, I think, here. Buildings in rear yards. It's the same issue.
Yes. Yep.
You all
I agree.
agree? Approved?
Approved.
Yes.
Parking regulations are seeking a waiver in order to build or to provide the 30 spaces that are shown on the plans.
Right. And all of our conditions on parking that will be in the special permit,
Yes.
the comprehensive permit.
Yeah. Are you inclined to approve that one?
This is
Parking?
parking, right? The parking
Yeah.
condition, yes, we do.
You all right with that one?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Yes.
sorry. I'm trying not to be presumptuous here. So they're looking to limit enforcement action to the provisions of the bylaw for which, they need waivers. Building permits shall be issued subject to the 40B statute, etc.
And Trudy, is this a standard waiver in all of our 40B permits?
It is.
Okay.
Shall we say approved?
Yes.
Yes,
Oops, why am I doing this tonight? It's because I'm tired. Submission of plots. Okay, it exceeds 40B. Construction shall be reasonable conformance with the project plans. Approved as part of the comp permit.
And this is another standard one that we include in all of our permits, so I think we can approve that.
Yeah. Issuance of COs, waivers sought with respect to enforcement of the above provisions of the zoning bylaw and other local bylaws for which waivers have been requested. So basically what they're saying is, don't deny us a CO because we're in non-compliance with some aspect of your local zoning, which we've asked you to waive in order to build the comp permit.
Right. If that's, we can
So
approve that.
Yeah, it's a standard piece.
Yep.
Okay. My cursor's jumping around all over the place in here. It's funny. Oh, I already did that, I guess. No, I didn't. Here it is. Requiring site plan approval, you know, that's.
Right.
You're proving that because they don't have to go through site plan approval.
Correct.
It's equal
Yep, that's
weight.
right.
Yeah. Notice requirements. Seeking a waiver of that because the notice requirements that apply are those which are governed by 40B. Comprehensive permit law.
That's another standard waiver. Is
The
that right?
standard-
Okay, that's right.
So they're seeking a waiver of conditions required that would apply to a special permit or other permits because they're permitting the project under 40B. I'm actually
Yeah.
not sure why there's even a waiver requested of this, but I'm not going to go there. They're not applying for a special permit, so why does anything in the special permit section of the bylaw apply? I don't know. So local rules and regulations pertaining to the use of public rights of way, including work in public ways, et cetera. So they're looking for a waiver to the extent that they would be required to get an additional permit from the select board. Instead, we're asking the Board of Appeals to approve the proposed driveway location, work in public ways, and utilities as part of the comp permit, subject to any applicable state or federal laws.
So
they're
Judy,
saying
is
that part on
the
the
point that
select
there are permits issued by the select board?
Yeah.
Right, and so we're not waiving the DPW's right to approve anything here. We're
That's
just
correct.
waiving things to the extent that the select board would need to
That's
approve them.
correct. That's correct.
And these are all, again, we have plans that describe, you know, obviously we know the driveway locations, we have utility plans. And so we have plans we can hold the applicant to build to. Okay, so I'm okay with this.
I am as well.
Giselle, are you?
Oh, yes, thank you.
And I think we're getting close to the end here. The wetlands, they're asking for a waiver from the local wetlands bylaw and regulations because, first of all, they would be subject to the state act and not the local bylaw, but they're also would not go to the Conservation Commission anyway because, you know, under the local bylaw because they don't have to. So you would be acting as the local Conservation Commission. So that's part of it. And the other part of it is the regulations. They are requesting a waiver from section 6 of the regs with respect to a particular sentence. This has been in other permits, by the way. The commission may also find that protection of the interests identified in the bylaw require that the applicant meet additional standards. Their assertion is we only have to meet the standards of 131 section 40, the State Wetlands Act. So, you know, this sort of section would say the commission could deny an order of conditions or something because someone failed to address those additional standards and the applicant saying we can't be bound by those. We're asking the Board of Appeals to approve the project, acting in your capacity as the entity, if you will, with authority over the local wetlands bylaw for purposes of this submission.
Okay, so of course, you know, we don't have the same expertise as the Conservation Commission on these issues, but I think the point to restate it here, Judy, is they are still subject to the State Wetlands Act.
Yes,
And what they're asking for relief from here is to the extent that the Milton ordinance imposes greater obligations.
Yep.
than the state act, that they be waived from those.
Yep.
I'm assuming, given the slope of the site, this is not wetland, or do we actually, I don't know if it's in the record. Is this in jurisdiction? I think I saw one of the draft conditions.
the riverfront,
The
They're-
riverfront area.
yeah, they are, and they're gonna have to file with Concom, and that's actually in the conditions.
This is under like the state's regulations, right? Is it within 200 feet of a river? Is that that's
Yes,
the idea, right? Okay. But are we actually aware of any greater standards that Milton would have opposed that are being relieved, or is this kind of a theoretical one just in case?
I think it's a just in case. I actually don't know your local wetlands regulations well enough to
Yeah.
comment. What I often look for, however, in these cases, is whether there were comments from the Conservation Commission
Yeah,
suggesting that a particular waiver might be a problem, and I don't see anything like that in the record. I did
Yeah.
look. I went on your website again just to make sure I had everything that had been filed, and I
Yeah.
didn't see anything from Concom.
and have there been such comments from the Milton Conservation Commission on other 40B projects?
They provided some comments on, Ice House, they provided some comments on.
Yeah.
Because of the
Okay.
proximity, I saw it there. They may have given some comments on 582 Blue Hill Ave, I don't remember.
They did appear at a couple Blue Hill Ave hearings.
Yeah,
My recollection, Judy, was that we didn't waive in Blue Hill Ave and that they were still going to have to go through the Conservation Commission. Is
only
that-
only for the state law.
Only for the state law, okay.
Yeah.
Which would be the same under what's proposed here.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
All right, if we're following the precedent for other projects, we haven't received any special communication from the Conservation Commission, then I would approve this waiver.
Yeah,
I
I
agree.
didn't see anything in the record from them. So I'm going to assume this is approved. And I think that may be, no, we have this. They wanted waivers from your regulations because they're submitting what the state sort of requires them to submit under the state 40B regulations. I have not read your rules and regulations enough to be able to comment intelligently about what draconian things you may require that the state does not. So I can't comment, but they're asking for any waiver of your local regulations.
I mean, but, so this, for example, has a waiver of all fees and deposits. I mean, that's not acceptable, right? I mean, we do require them, including in our proposed conditions, to reimburse certain costs incurred by the town.
Right. Well, that would be, this is one of these things that you would waive only to the extent allowed, or not except as superseded by the conditions. So when we say in the conditions, they have to provide a bond or security for site restoration in case they start work and then they disappear. If we're saying they have to provide assistance to the building department to review plans, that's in the conditions, and this does not change that. And I don't know your fees, your application fees enough to comment. I just don't. I have my own opinion about this, but it's not my permit.
Well, may we ask what your opinion is about this?
I never waive fees. I never waive fees. for
Yeah,
that.
I guess I don't know. Has this been standard in our other permits?
I'm actually not remembering, to be honest, this is bothering me now. I'm not remembering whether this has been asked for. But the only way I've ever, just speaking for myself, and I have been in your shoes more times than you want to know, I will consider waiving fees for a nonprofit developer. If it's 100% affordable project, that's to me very different. But I don't waive fees. I just don't.
Well, I guess I'd be particularly focused on the third-party expenses we've incurred for our peer review consultants.
That's in the condition.
And I guess I don't know if they've all been paid, and do we have that, all invoiced and collected, and maybe we should leave this open and see. I don't know if Tim would have some advice for us on this as well, but I guess to the extent the comment is technical requirements, like if we had some notice requirements, or we had a form that's in our application process that was due 4 months ago that got missed, and they don't want to have a technical defect. I would be
So
okay with
this
that
is-
kind of waiver, but I think I'd be reluctant to make a monetary waiver unless we were confident that everything in the past was collected and everything in the future is in a condition.
This is specific to your rules and regulations.
Isn't the reimbursement? Well, actually, we should ask you. Isn't the reimbursement of our
I would hope
expenses
so.
under
I
right?
would
So
hope
that's
I mean, they have
Oh.
funded the peer review work so far. What I can't comment on, Crystal would have a better handle on it than I do, is whether everything is paid up.
well, maybe if just leave this one open, and if we could just ask Tim and Crystal or whoever the right person is to let us know where we stand and what fees and deposits would they like the town to be able to continue to assert and collect, so we don't waive something that we should be entitled to.
Exactly. I just think, however, that this is specifically your rules and regulations for comp permits. I don't think it's other departmental fees and so forth. It's you guys. So you must have some awful fee schedule in your rules and regs that I'm not familiar with.
You mean I see the Milton Zoning Board itself.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
All right. I mean, I don't know the source of authority for why we charge peer review fees. So I don't know what it is. If we should just get some advice. I don't want to waive something that prevents us from making the town whole on any costs it incurred.
So chapter 44, section 53G is the authority to be able to have an escrow account into which an applicant's funds go to pay peer review consultants you hire. I'm not sure that's what this says, filing fees and deposits. I can look at it, Ryan. I don't know, but
Yeah, let's just know what we're being asked to waive, right? If we're to find out there are no fees and you and Tim tell us there actually are no fees, okay, then so be it. But if there are fees, we ought to decide consciously we're not trying to collect them, or say no, in fact we are.
Yeah, I'll take a look tomorrow. I don't have them open now, but I'll look.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Maybe-
It seems to me that this waiver seems it's like of a different character.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the other waivers are saying there's a chapter 40B process, so we shouldn't have to do this other stuff, and that actually makes sense.
Right.
This is saying, can we waive something that you've put in place specifically for the chapter 40B process? So I'm in agreement. I think it's hard to agree to in the abstract.
Yeah. So I was involved once with a town where a few weeks before a large development came in that everyone was expecting, the board kind of rushed and put together rules and regulations for comp permits that set outrageously high fees on a per unit basis. And it was done precisely because that project was coming in the door. That's abuse. But I think that when boards have a reasonable application fee or something, that's a different matter. And I also would say, although no one ever wants to admit it, the work that goes into it on the staff level to run these procedures is enormous. Tim reminded me today that since the beginning of 2021, your board has had 147 40B hearings.
Wow.
And, there's staff time in every single one of those. So when people balk about filing fees and so forth with ZBAs, it just, my view, and I'm really probably being very inappropriate here. My view is take a hike, really, just stop it and pay the fee. You guys have no idea how much staff time gets caught up in this.
Okay, all right, well, thanks for doing that homework for us, Judy. Appreciate that.
Yeah, well, Tim's message today was a little bit mind blowing to me. So 147 hearings. I think I've gotten more white hair on my head since I started working with you guys. Honest to God, that's a lot of meetings. And I haven't even been on all of these. So anyway, do you, in light of that, pardon me,
I wouldn't
John?
talk about. I said it's a lot of meetings, but I will never discuss your hair and the color.
Do you guys want to think about this more?
I think, I don't know, by the way, Judy, thank you. It's a super thoughtful decision. You got to us yesterday ahead of the hearing. I wasn't able to read it completely in detail. I got most of the way through it, so I'll be ready to discuss it in more detail the next time. I'm wondering if it might be make more sense just to wait to dive into the conditions until our next hearing as opposed to starting to wade into them tonight?
I think that's fine, and then I can finish the other sections too.
Okay.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah.
I did have one question though, Judy. The one of the conditions discusses how the affordable units will be interspersed among the project. I have a view that, it's a, challenge for families who need affordable housing to find 4-bedroom units. And I would like one of the, I think it'd be, great to add at least one more 4-bedroom housing unit to the town's affordable housing stock. So I would like to see one of the 2 4-bedroom units be restricted as affordable.
Well, at
Is there
least
any
one
reason the
will have
planning
to
board
be.
can't weigh
One
into
of
that?
them- One of them
Right.
has to be.
I think we should say that in the decision, right? Because I think all it says is now is interspersed. And I would prefer to have 3 allocated among the 12 townhouses, and then one of the 2 4-family units, 4-bedroom units rather. And I just wanted to get it. I wanted to make sure it wasn't a legal reason why that was deferred to a subsidizing agency, and that it'd be appropriate for the zoning board to weigh in on that.
So it is a decision of the subsidizing agency as to where the affordable units go. And of course, bear in mind that with a rental project, those affordable units might float a little bit. What might start as an affordable unit might become a market rate unit and so forth. It'll shift. It could shift. I assume that's how they're designing this. But it's ultimately a decision of the subsidizing agency. So the problem you've got is if you start trying to impose, if you try to assert yourself in that area where it's their jurisdiction, do you end up opening yourself up to an appeal you weren't expecting, even if the rest of the decision was acceptable to the applicant? I hear you. I'm really struck by the whole design of this project. It's quite unusual.
I would think if anything, for the density of the project, like a significant contribution of affordability should be celebrated. And to me, I would like to think this developer who's taking advantage of this statute, wouldn't want to take this in appeal because it's too much of an affordable burden on them. And so I don't know, my point of view, well, I'm going to think about this, but I just wanted to understand why we hadn't taken a position on it. To me, that seems like a great asset to have for, a family in need of 4 bedrooms.
I will be shocked if the subsidizing agency doesn't require them to have at least one of those 4-bedroom units affordable. Because that's
So
actually.
then it won't be controversial for us to have that.
It shouldn't
Yeah.
be. I'm
Okay,
just
great.
telling you what
Yeah.
fictionally, it's a subsidizing agency. If you want to hurt yourself in that direction, you can do that. And it's really going to be up to the applicant to say, is it worth fighting this out?
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Well, is it something that could be suggested rather than ordered?
That's
So
up to
when the subsidizing agency makes its decision, they'll know what our view is. And then you avoid a waiver. So you avoid a possible loss.
You could say interspersed throughout the unit types in the development.
The challenge here is, if we had, 4 and 12, right, then it would be a rule, right? But now I'm just thinking there could be some discretion for the subsidizing agency to provide, some, say here, the townhouses are for the affordable units, and the 4 bedrooms out front are market rate. And it just seems to me the spirit of the deal is not that.
Right.
So
I would hope that would not happen. I mean, you guys have to decide what you're comfortable doing. And it really throws the ball in the applicant's court and everybody else to decide if they live with something like that.
Yeah, I like the idea, Brian. I think would be helpful to have a full-size home essentially for a family at an affordable price in Milton.
I mean, it would I would be shocked if they did not require it, because the whole issue around 40B over the last more than 2 decades has been the insufficiency of family housing for people who need affordable units. So if the state did not require at least one of those 4-bedroom units to be affordable, I would be shocked and frankly appalled. I just can't imagine it.
All right, great. Thanks, Judy. That's helpful.
So how far you want to go in this is entirely up to you guys. If you want to assert, you know, a requirement and let the chips fall where they may, that's up to you.
Yeah, I guess I'm hearing you say you'd be shocked to be a problem, and that's consistent. So I guess I'm not sure why there's controversy in it, right? So
There shouldn't
all right, well,
be.
why don't we think about it and we can pick it back up at our next hearing.
That's fine.
Okay.
Are we going
But
to try
thanks
to
for all your work,
do
Judy.
this
It's
tonight, or are we
a lot of
done?
work, I know, for you to. It's a lot of work to get this draft for us to review. So thanks for all your effort on it.
No problem. No problem.
Yes,
Do you want to
thank-
try to do any more on this tonight, or are you as brain dead as I am?
Well, I mean, look, it seems for now we have the conditions and then we have the waivers, right? So we completed the waivers, and it seems just doesn't. I think we just discussed probably doesn't make sense to start on the conditions. We can start fresh at our next meeting, and so if I have it right, before our next meeting, we'll have a draft decision from you, Judy. Is that right?
I'm just going to finish out the rest of it. Yeah.
Right, which is with the
Yeah.
procedural and whatnot. And then we could, when we convene, we can review the conditions, follow up on the deferred waivers, provide any comments on the base decision.
Yeah.
And well, I guess we'll see when we get into the decisions if we're able to resolve conditions, if we're able to resolve them all, if we need more time. But we're getting close to completion, if it feels like.
I think so.
And, Judy, I think it would be helpful for me if I could have a session with you before the next meeting.
Sure. Yeah.
Because to the extent where I land is, additional conditions to address some of the concerns I've expressed today, it might be just expedient for me to talk those out for you to have them
Be happy to do that.
in the draft beforehand. So I'll be in touch.
Oh, that's fine. That would be great.
Thank you so much. And I echo Brian's thanks for the hard work on the conditions.
Thank you.
So if we're going to adjourn for the night, when are we going to schedule our
That'd be
next
my question.
hearing?
My schedule's a mess. Oh, it's so bad.
Should we go to next
What-
next Monday? Is that too soon for you, Judy?
I'm in Tisbury next Monday for a big meeting. I'm trying to get my calendar open right now.
I hope it's remote.
No, I actually have to go there for this one. A lot of them have been, but not this one.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Not
People
because it's
think-
not a mixed place, because it's not nearby, right?
That's the point. It's like people sort of get
Yeah.
these romantic ideas about going to the vineyard, right? Well, when it's a work meeting, it's not so romantic. And
Right.
when it goes to
Right.
9 o'clock at night, you wonder if you're going to get off the island. Today's the 12th.
Tuesday the 20th?
So I have a meeting penciled in right now in North Andover. How early can you guys meet? I forget. You're all on somewhat different schedules. Are you able to meet any sooner or any earlier than 7:30?
I mean, I can't speak for the town. For me personally, on that night, I could meet anytime.
I could start as early as 5, the town, so.
On the 20th, unfortunately, I'm unavailable.
What
I'm-
about the 21st? I actually have that night. It looks to me like that night is open.
I
Yes,
can't make
that
this one.
originally,
I can't make the
open.
21st. Unfortunately. 22nd?
So I probably could meet with you on the 22nd. I have my own ZBA meeting that night, but we have enough alternates that I think I can step aside. So why don't you assume that I could meet with you on the 22nd?
Judy, am I detecting that in all of your free time, after you professionally spend time with zoning boards in your free time, are you volunteering on a zoning board?
I've been on my own zoning board since 2008. I actually
Good
love
for
it. I
you.
really do.
What a valuable member.
Okay.
On the
Um,
22nd, did you want to try to meet earlier or do you want to keep 7 o'clock?
It would be great if we could meet earlier or actually, yeah, it would be great if it'd be great if we could maybe even meet around 7:30. There's a potential that I'm going to have to be in Barnstable earlier. So if I could do the meeting there and then hop in my car and join my own ZBA meeting in the car, thanks to my phone, that would work. So I don't know what earlier looks like for you guys that day.
Okay.
I could
Or later,
yeah, I think
7:30.
anytime on the 22nd.
I
Huh?
have conflict from 5:30 to 7:30. So
7:30 would be fine.
okay.
8 would be fine. I mean, I don't care. That's fine. John, what do you think? 22nd, 7:30, 8 o'clock, would that work for you?
I can make it work. 8 o'clock starts to get a little bit late, but when do you expect to be finishing up your earlier work?
Probably the
Is
end of
8
the-
o'clock? Does it give you more flexibility, Judy? 8
Yeah, I've
o'clock is
got-
at
Despite my own ZBA meeting that night, I may actually have to be in Barnstable. So the Barnstable meeting I would be done with, and I could then focus on this. I could just go to their planning department and do this meeting on my computer. They would let me stay.
Let's just stay there till 10 o'clock at 10:30.
They're just like every other town, right? They have meetings that go on all night. So,
Okay.
7:30 would be great.
Works for me.
Works for me.
So you guys can't meet early, right? Like 5 o'clock? That doesn't work for you guys, I guess, right?
Which is
Not on the 22nd.
7:30.
I don't
I
know
could
what you,
4 or 5, like in the afternoon, but
you could? Really?
About in
Brian,
there.
I can set it up for
4 o'clock.
earlier. So that's up to you.
What about if we said like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock? Can you do that?
I can.
Yeah, does 3 o'clock give you enough time, Judy, to make your
Yeah,
next?
yeah. Brian,
Okay.
please say yes.
I mean, so all right, so yes, it is sort of the middle of the workday. Is this how long do you think we'll march through? No, we'll deliberate as much as ever. All right, so we're gonna do 3 to 5. Is that what we're
I could
holding?
hug you guys. That would be perfect. That would like fix my whole night if you wait to do this at 3 o'clock. John, can you do 3 o'clock on the 22nd?
Yes.
Good.
Okay.
It's settled.
Excellent.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so
Thank you.
we'll adjourn to the 22nd at 3 o'clock, and
That's great.
somebody has some irreconcilable issue that pops up, just, let us know. And
Yeah.
We'll just have to continue the hearing to some other evening. So, Giselle, anything else we need to add here?
No, I thank you for your feedback and your comments, and Brian's and Judy's, and you've all given me a lot to think about, and I appreciate the opportunity to sort of air my concern.
That's fine. Thank you.
I'll sit smiling on you. That's what I'll do. Hey, Brian, do you have anything else you want to add here?
No, nothing else.
Okay, Crystal, anything we're missing here as far as you're concerned?
I don't believe so.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to continue this hearing to the September 22nd at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. And I think we'll go from 3 to 5 because I
Okay.
think, Giselle, you're busy at 5:30.
5:30.
Okay.
Giving you a half an hour, is that sufficient time to
It is. Thank you.
straighten out your mind after we close all the confusion and get to something that's important?
Brian, you look so thrilled about 3 o'clock meeting. We just like corner you or something. I feel really bad about it. I'm just trying to make this work.
It works, right? It's hard to make schedules work, so it's fine.
Okay.
Okay, so we're continuing this to September 22nd at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I want to thank Judy for all of your hard work. I'd still be on the first section of the waivers without your kind help. And let's see if we can make further progress and maybe get this case in a position where we can close it out at one additional hearing. I think we'll probably need another hearing, but who knows? Maybe we'll make remarkable progress. So with all of that, thank you, folks, and
Thank you very
be
much.
safe.
Okay,
Great.
thank you all. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Here, bye-bye.